My son called me an embarrassment in front of 11 people who controlled enough money to buy a small country, and he did it over a coin. Not just any coin. It was a 1967 Canadian Centennial silver dollar, the one my own father pressed into my 12-year-old hand in a wheat field outside Portage-la-Prairie, the summer this country turned 100. The dollar had stayed silver bright through 50 years. It smelled like old pockets and prairie wind. My father told me, "Alistair, keep this. When the world gets mean, hold it and remember where you came from." I had kept it through 3 moves, 2 recessions, the death of my wife, and 38 years of building a company from nothing but plywood, frostbite, and stubbornness. I am Alistair, and this is how I taught my son the most expensive lesson of his life. If you've ever had someone take something you built and treat it like it cost them nothing, stay with me. Because I read every one of your comments, and I know I'm not the only one who has stood in the cold wondering where the person they raised has gone. The dinner was at Harbour 60, a steakhouse on the Toronto waterfront, where they charged more for a glass of wine than I used to pay my first crew for a full afternoon of work. My son had booked the private room. 11 guests, partners from his investment group. A city councillor I recognized from the news, 2 women in blazers who spoke exclusively in percentages, and my daughter-in-law Margot, who had positioned herself at the center of the table like a piece of furniture selected to impress visitors. My grandson Finn sat between me and his mother, looking uncomfortable in a collar shirt that was too tight at the neck. I waited until the appetizers were cleared. I reached into my jacket pocket and set the coin on the tablecloth in front of Finn. "This was your great-grandfather's," I said, "and then it was mine, now it's yours." Finn picked it up and turned it slowly. He looked at the loon on one face, the spray of maple leaves on the other. His eyes went wide and still, the way they always did when I gave him something old, like he was trying to hear it. He never got the chance to say thank you. My son reached across and lifted the coin from the boy's fingers without looking at him. He held it up between his thumb and forefinger, tilting it toward the chandelier the way you'd inspect something you found in a parking lot drain. The table went quiet. "Dad," his voice carried the flat, impatient weight of a man performing frustration for an audience. "Come on. It belonged to your grandfather. Put it back. It is literally worth $1. He set it on the edge of his bread plate like a cherry pit. "We're at Harbour 60. The parking valet outside makes more than this in 10 minutes. He glanced at the couple to his left and let out a short, practiced laugh. "He thinks this is a gift." I looked at Margot. She was studying her phone. "It's a Centennial silver dollar," I said. "It's a keepsake. It teaches him something. It teaches him that Grandpa shops at Dollarama." A second laugh from the table, louder. Finn was staring at his placemat. The tips of his ears had gone red. My son picked up the coin and dropped it into the bread basket at the center of the table. It disappeared under the folded linen napkin. "If you want to give him something real," he said, reaching for his wine, "put money in his resp. Or better yet, stop making me look cheap in front of people who actually understand what value means. You've lived under my roof for 4 years. I think that earns me the right to ask you to show up and act like you belong here. Or don't show up at all." I put both hands flat on the tablecloth. The room had the hush of people trying not to exist. "Enjoy your evening," I said. I pushed my chair back. The legs made a sound on the hardwood floor like a door being locked. My son waved his hand once in my direction, the way you'd wave off a slow taxi. I walked past the maitre, past the coat check, through the heavy glass doors and into the November cold off Lake Ontario. The wind hit me straight in the face. I stood on the pavement and breathed. Then I reached into my jacket for my car keys. He had taken them at the start of the night. He said his valet needed to park all the guests' cars together. He had not mentioned I would be leaving alone. I walked 11 blocks back to his house in Rosedale. The wind was mean and my coat was not heavy enough. Here is what my son had never bothered to understand about the paperwork he signed 5 years ago when I handed him the CEO title of Albury Development Group. He did not own it, not in the way he thought. Everything. The company shares, the Rosedale house, the Muskoka cottage, the commercial properties along Queensway, sat inside a revocable family trust I had established in 2009. On the advice of my lawyer Garland, the most methodical man I had ever worked with, and the only person in my adult life who had told me the truth, even when I'd have preferred a comfortable lie. The trust named my son as beneficiary. But I was the settler. Under the trust deed, I had retained the power to revoke, amend, or terminate the arrangement at any time, for any reason, without notice. Garland had called it the safeguard clause when we drafted it. Between ourselves, over the years, we had called it the winter key, the one you keep nailed behind the door in case the seasons turns. I got back to the house just after 10. My suite was in the basement, a converted storage room, with a window that looked out at garden level, barred with iron. My daughter-in-law had suggested it when I moved in, saying it would be quieter for me. I had agreed because I did not want to make trouble, but I had been in the construction business for 38 years, and I knew exactly what that room was. It was where you put the things you needed to keep, but did not want to look at. I sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the light. My wife Vera used to say that when I got very quiet, she got very worried. She said still water runs deep, and still Alistair runs deeper. She was right about most things. She died 6 years ago, and I still reach for her in the mornings. I called Garland. He answered on the second ring. That was Garland. He did not let things go to voicemail. "It's Alistair," I said. "How bad?" He dropped my father's silver dollar into the bread basket and told me I lived under his roof out of charity. A long pause. "Then do you want to activate the clause?" I thought about Finn's red ears. I thought about the man in the expensive suit who had laughed with the table. I thought about that coin disappearing under a white linen napkin. "Yes," I said. "I want it all, Garland. Every share, every account, every property that ever had my name on it. I want the transfers complete by morning and an eviction notice on this house by noon." "Understood. And you?" "I'll be gone before he wakes up." I spent 2 hours doing what I had quietly prepared for over the previous several months. The way you keep a go-bag for a storm season. Not because you plan on the flood, but because you are not foolish enough to pretend it cannot come. 3 boxes already packed, stored in the back of the utility closet. My late wife's photograph, my original work ledgers from 1987 through 1995, my insulated thermos from the job sites. I left everything else. The guest robes my daughter-in-law had provided with her charity word smile. The paperbacks I'd bought at a Goodwill on Danforth to have something to read in the evenings. Before I left, I went to the kitchen. I found the bread basket on the counter where the server had left it, still folded. The coin was under the napkin. I put it in my breast pocket. Then I walked out through the side entrance and got into my old F-150, parked on the street because the garage was full of my son's cars. I drove to a Holiday Inn on King Street, paid cash, called Garland from the room phone. "Done," he said. "The trust account transfers executed at midnight. His personal checking, the joint savings, the company operating account, the RRSP holdings, all redirected. The credit cards are frozen as of 1 a.m. I have a termination order on the utilities effective 7 o'clock. By the time he gets to the kitchen, there will not be a functioning card in that house." "The eviction notice?" "Courier's is delivering at 9. His name is not on the deed. It was never on the deed. He has been living there as a guest of the trust." I looked at the water-stained ceiling of the Holiday Inn room. It was the most honest ceiling I had slept under in 4 years. "The boy?" I said. "Finn is at school tomorrow. He is safe for now. I've asked a contact at Child Services to keep a file open." I slept 6 hours. Real sleep, not the light, anxious half-consciousness I had managed in that basement with the boiler clanking below me. I woke up knowing exactly where I was and exactly what came next. In the morning, I got a large double-double from Tim Hortons around the corner and a toasted bagel, and I sat in the window and I watched the city come alive, and I thought about my son. At 7:14, his assistant called Garland's office, frantic, wanting to know why the corporate cards were declining at a parking machine. At 7:40, my son called the RBC branch manager directly. The manager told Garland afterward that he could hear him through a closed office door. At 8:05, the power in the Rosedale house went out. At 8:22, the courier rang the bell with the eviction notice in an envelope marked urgent, legal matter. I know these times because Garland is methodical, And because I had installed the home security system myself in 2021, and the account access had never left my name. I watched through the app on my phone. My son moved through the dark house in his bathrobe, his phone flashlight sweeping the rooms. He went to my suite last. He kicked the door open, found the empty closet, the bare shelves, the stripped mattress. On the pillow I had left the 1967 silver dollar and a note on Holiday Inn stationery. You said I didn't understand value. You were right. I took mine back. He read it once, crumpled it, then smoothed it out and read it again. He sat down on the edge of the bare mattress. The flashlight trembled in his hand. In the weeks that followed, he tried everything a man with no money tries when he still believes he is in charge. He hired a Bay Street litigation firm and filed for an emergency injunction claiming mental incapacity on my part. Garland had the application dismissed in 4 business days, submitting a letter from my physician of 12 years and 3 years of board meeting minutes, in which I had been the most coherent voice in every room. He called family friends trying to find me. He called my sister in Winnipeg. She told him she hadn't heard from me and didn't much feel like being his errand runner. Then he posted on Facebook and Instagram that his elderly father had gone missing and might be in a confused state. The video had Finn in it. That was the mistake that ended the game. I was staying at the Muskoka cottage by then. The roads up in November are quiet, and I had winterized the place properly every autumn since 1998. It was warm and it was mine, and it sat on a lake that had no one's name on it but the water's own. I watched the video on my phone sitting by the wood stove. My son had pulled Finn out of school in Leaside. He was still legally the father, still had that right. The restraining orders Garland had filed were sitting on a judge's desk, waiting for a signature, and driven him to a parking lot behind a grocery store. I know what he said to the boy to make him cry. I will not write it here because Finn will be older one day, and I do not want this document to be the thing he finds. What I will write is that there is a bruise visible on the boy's left wrist in the school pickup footage Garland's contact obtained. It is the shape and size of an adult hand. The video caption said, "Please help us find my father. He has disappeared and may be suffering from a mental health crisis. His grandson is heartbroken." It had been viewed 11,000 times by the time I called Garland. "I'm going in," I said. That is precisely what he wants. I know that. He has contacted a Dr. Veazey, struck off the College of Physicians role in 2019, who he intends to use to have you placed on a Form 1 under the Mental Health Act, an involuntary psychiatric assessment, if he gets you into a room with that man. He will not. I watched the fire. Call Dr. Farquhar at St. Michael's. She's known me for 12 years. I want a documented competency assessment completed before I walk into that building. I want it on hospital letterhead with a witness. Then I want to use the main atrium. A pause, then. You're setting the table. I'm setting the table, I said. I drove back to the city the next morning. I had a good suit at the cottage. I always keep a suit at the cottage. My wife Vera used to find this deeply amusing. She said I was the only man in Muskoka who packed for a shareholder meeting. And I put it on over a pressed shirt and the green silk tie Vera had given me for our 40th anniversary. I looked in the mirror above the fireplace. 65 years old, gray at the temples, considerably more gray everywhere else. Hands that had poured concrete in February, and held a newborn and signed the papers that built and weathered a company through 2 recessions. I did not look confused. I did not look frail. I looked like what I was, the man who owned the building. Garland had leaked my supposed location through a mutual contact who owed him a favor. The word passed along was that a disoriented elderly man matching my description had been seen at St. Michael's asking for his family, appearing unwell. The message reached my son by mid-morning. He arrived at the hospital at 11:40 with Margot on one side, Finn on the other, and a man with a black medical bag trailing behind. He was scanning the atrium with the focused, narrowed look of someone who has convinced himself he is hunting instead of walking into a trap. I stepped out from behind one of the concrete pillars at the far end of the atrium. I had been standing there, quite comfortably, for 22 minutes. My son saw me. He started walking fast, then faster. "Dad, thank God." He put his arm around my shoulders before I could step back, and I let him, because it was important that every camera in that room catch him doing it. You had us so worried, Dad. This is Doc Veazey. He's here to help. We just need to do a quick assessment. Spencer. It was the voice I had used for 38 years on job sites when a wall was going up wrong. Room stopped for that voice. Let go of my arm. He stopped. I looked past him to Finn. The boy was standing 2 feet back from his father, holding his own jacket in both hands like something to hide behind. His wrist was bandaged. Come here, buddy, I said. Finn stays with me. My son stepped in front of him. He glanced over his shoulder at Veazey. Sir. Dr. Farquhar's voice, calm and carrying, came from my left. She had known me since I was 53 and had agreed when I explained the situation 2 days earlier that justice and medicine were not always separate concerns. She stepped forward with 2 hospital security officers. You cannot conduct a medical assessment in this facility without authorization and without the subject's explicit consent. This man was assessed by appointment this morning. The results are documented. She held up a folder. He is in full cognitive health. My son blinked. What? Mr. Aldbury contacted this hospital 2 days ago and requested a formal competency evaluation, she said. I conducted it personally. He is not confused. He is not a missing person. He is a patient who kept his appointment. She turned to Veazey. I'll need to see your current college registration, please, because I'm not finding you in our system. Veazey took 1 step back, then another. I turned to face my son. He looked the way I imagined he had looked at 6 years old, when he had broken something important and was calculating whether the lie would hold. The calculation was not working. You hurt him, I said, quietly. You put your hand on that boy to make him cry for your video. That's not. I saw the footage, Spencer, every second of it. I've been watching the house for a month. I have recordings going back further than that, from the home security system I installed, the one still registered in my name. I let that sit. And I have the forensic audit results from Aldbury's accounts. 2 years of company funds running through Shell invoices. The Porsche listed as a site vehicle. The ski trip to Whistler billed as a client inspection. The numbers are very clear. His face went a color I don't have a word for. Garland appeared at my right shoulder, with the precision he had maintained for 30 years, at every critical moment, without fail. Spencer Aldbury, he said in the tone he used when the outcome was already written, I am serving you with a notice of termination of beneficiary status under the Aldbury Family Trust. He extended a sealed envelope. My son did not take it. Garland placed it against his chest and released it. Accompanying that are the restraining order relating to your son and a formal complaint filed with Toronto Police this morning, alleging assault on a minor and financial fraud. 3 uniformed officers came through the doors on the east side of the atrium. My daughter-in-law made a sound I had never heard from her. Something cracked loose in it. My son looked at me. The performance was gone. What was left was something younger and rawer and sadder, and I recognized it because I had last seen it when his mother died, and he had stood in the funeral home hallway not knowing where to put his hands. You planned this from the beginning, he said. I planned for the possibility, I said. I hoped I wouldn't need it. Those are different things. He looked at the envelope. He looked at the officers. He looked at Finn, standing 5 feet away, very still. I thought I was the one holding everything together, he said. Not to me, just to the air between us. You were living in a house that belonged to a trust, I said. Running a company that belonged to a trust. Spending money that was loaned to you by that trust, on the condition you behaved like a man worth trusting. You weren't holding anything together. I was. They moved him toward the doors. He went without fighting, which surprised me, and which I will think about for a long time. Margot was louder. She had options she was shouting about, rights she was invoking, names of people she was going to call. The officers were patient with her. They had heard it before. And then they were gone through the sliding doors, and the atrium was quiet. Finn stood in the middle of the room, not crying, just watching the doors where his parents had been. I walked over to him. I crouched down, which my knees registered their formal objection to, and I looked him in the eye. Are you okay? I asked. He thought about it carefully, the way he always thought, which was one of the things I loved best about him. He had his mother's eyes, but his thinking was his own. I think so, he said. Where are we going? North, I said. You've never been to the cottage in winter. Is there snow? Probably a foot of it by now. He considered this seriously, as he considered everything. Then he nodded. I reached into my breast pocket and took out the silver dollar. I set it in his palm and closed his fingers around it. He opened his hand and looked at it. Your great-great-grandfather broke ground on his first farm with that coin in his pocket, I said. Your great-grandfather gave it to me in a wheat field in Manitoba in 1967, the summer this country turned 100. I carried it through the years that were hard and the years that weren't. Now it's yours. Finn studied both faces of the coin. Grandpa, he said, it's only worth $1. It's worth exactly what you decide it's worth, I said. That's the whole lesson. He put it carefully into his jacket pocket, using both hands. Garland drove us to the parking garage. Finn sat in the back of my truck, quiet, watching the city. We got on the highway going north and he fell asleep before we reached Barrie, with one hand tucked into his jacket pocket over the coin. I drove with both hands on the wheel, the heater running, the radio low. The trees thickened on either side as the highway opened up, and the sky above them went the deep, unambiguous blue of a Canadian November evening. No performance in it, no attempt at anything, just the honest dark of a season doing what seasons do. My son would be in processing for the next several hours. The courts would take months. The fraud charges, the assault on Finn, the involvement of an unlicensed physician. Garland would manage all of it with the same methodical patience he had brought to everything for 30 years. But those were papers, numbers, processes. The actual living thing was asleep in the back seat of my truck with a 1967 silver dollar in his pocket. My wife Vera used to say that the point of building something wasn't the thing itself. It was the person you became in the building of it and what you could pass forward. She said it about the company. But I understood now that she had meant something larger than any company I could name. I drove north. Behind me, a city was sorting out the wreckage of a man who had forgotten where he came from. Ahead of me, a frozen lake and a cottage, and the first real silence I had found in years. The highway curved through the dark trees, and I followed it, unhurried. The way you follow a road you have driven so many times you no longer need to think about the turns. My grandson was dreaming, and in his pocket, a dollar coin was already worth more than everything we had left behind.